This will be a nice, casual conversation. No pressure, Mr. Ambassador.
Great.
So for the purposes of our conversation tonight, we really want to focus on your Korean-American identity. You were born in Seoul, Korea, and immigrated to the U.S. at 13, which is a very delicate time. I have a son who just turned 12, so I understand that time can be a little challenging. You grew up in LA, but you studied on the East Coast at the University of Pennsylvania, so you have experience on both coasts, very different. You served in local community as a public prosecutor at the LA County District Attorney's Office, and of course you traveled the world as a diplomat. So first of all, I want to ask you, in your experience, what are the two most striking changes or developments that come to mind for Korean Americans and in the Korean diaspora?
Great. Thank you. I'm going to keep my responses brief, but can I first thank CKA for inviting me to this event. I attended last year, and I was desperately hoping that they would actually invite me back. So I'm not only here, but I'm actually on the stage, so it's quite an accomplishment. But I have to say, it's a little unfair to follow Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, one of the most famous, one of the most respected Koreans anywhere ever, especially when he tells a good joke. I think Bannam style, I think, has promised, Secretary General. I will reach out to Sai about that.
I'm definitely stealing his jokes too,
yes,
for sure.
Both of us.
Yes.
You know, as you mentioned, I moved to California when I was 13. It was a big change. I spoke no English. I was shy, skinny, Asian boy. There was hard to believe now, but at that time, even in my high school in Los Angeles, I was the only minority student for a while. So it was quite a change. And when I think about what has happened to the Korean American community since then, first of all, I mean, you can't deny the numbers, right? At that time, we were only about 70,000 Korean Americans in the whole country. Now we're up to almost 2 million Korean Americans, so that's impressive. But I think more impressive is how much the Korean American community has grown and expanded into so many different fields. And I think everyone in this room deserves tremendous credit. I mean, just look at everyone in this room and you get the sense of how prevalent, how expansive our community has become. So I would say those two are the most striking changes that I've noticed.
And what about, I find that having a family, trying to connect to your Korean heritage can be challenging as well. With each generation, it becomes more and more difficult, the language. What do you find most interesting about Korean Americans' relationship and connection to Korea and their roots?
I'm sure every immigrant community claims this, but I really do think that Korean American community has much stronger ties to the Korean heritage than other groups to their home country. Korean Americans often joke about how every time you have even a few Korean Americans, you get Korean restaurants and Korean churches. Sometimes Korean bars as well, but I wouldn't know anything about that. But I think it demonstrates our strong commitment to, strong respect for the Korean culture. And I really do think that's probably stronger than many other communities.
And is there a way to continue to strengthen those bonds with each passing generation?
I think definitely, and I think organizations like CKA have a role to play in that. I think we should teach our younger generation to be very proud of their Korean heritage and proud of the role they're playing in the American society as Korean Americans. And I think that's a way to promote, continue to facilitate the transition and continuity.
And this is kind of putting you on the spot, but is there one particular Korean value versus American value or together that has helped you through some of these turbulent waters of diplomacy in your experience?
Yeah, I'm always cautious about talking about values, particularly Korean values versus American or Western values, because there is obviously a huge convergence and overlap.
Of course.
I think it's really a question of sort of emphasis and priority. I do think when I look at my career, some of the traits that Asians or Koreans value, sort of putting the group dynamics ahead of individualism, trying to find a way to work out differences in a collective manner. I think that has helped me not only working in the State Department, it's a huge organization, and of course the US government, but in diplomacy as well. But at the same time, I think what we consider often to be sort of Western characteristics like individualism and creativity has also helped me in diplomacy as well. Believe me, when you're dealing with North Koreans, you need both discipline and creativity.
I can only imagine. So just starting in the mid to late 70s, the State Department developed programs to increase diversity in the diplomatic corps. But as of June of 2015, 82% of current Foreign Service officers were European Americans and held 86% of senior staff positions at State, and Asian Americans only make up 6.8% of Foreign Service officers and only 3.8% of senior staff positions. Now, do you have any suggestions, advice for Asian Americans who do want to pursue a career in foreign policy?
First of all, I always encourage young Korean Americans to consider public service because it's deeply gratifying. You take tremendous pride, and in my case, I think the opportunity, the privilege to represent the United States in Korea as the U.S. ambassador was just amazing. I still get chills thinking about it. So there's really rewarding opportunity out there, and I think Asian Americans, Korean Americans should continue to test themselves in different organizations in the public sector. The U.S. Foreign Service, I think for a long time was, very white, male, from the East Coast. Obviously, that does not reflect America. So I think over the years, the State Department has tried very hard to recruit much more broadly, geography-wise, ethnicity-wise, and I think we've done a good job. You mentioned 6.8% of Asian Americans in the U.S. Foreign Service, Korean Americans, but that's actually higher than the percentage of Asian Americans in the whole country, so that's good. But obviously we have more to do in terms of upward mobility because the number is underrepresented. I think part of that reflects the fact that Korean Americans are relatively new into the public sector. When I joined the State Department 27 years ago, there were just a handful of Korean Americans. Now I look around and there's so many bright, talented Korean Americans entering the U.S. Foreign Service and other government branches. So I think it's just a matter of time before we start to see the number of senior officials increase.
Are there steps, if you're trying to get into that field or attributes you need to pursue a tough job like that?
You have to pass a very tough exam.
Okay.
No, there's so many bright young Korean Americans out there. I don't think the entrance is really the issue. I think it's getting them interested in public service, I think, is the challenge for us.
All right. And I know you have a personal investment in seeing Korean Americans succeed and develop their full potential. We know that you have daughters. What do you wish for most on a personal note for your daughters as they go into adulthood, raising them in this current world climate, as Secretary General spoke so poignantly about tonight?
Yeah, no, I agree. I very much appreciated the Secretary General's comments about women's empowerment and really the importance of all of us doing more to encourage women in the workforce. I have two beautiful, talented young ladies. More than anything, I hope that they will continue to love me. But I do think, as I said earlier, we want young Korean Americans to take tremendous pride in their Korean heritage and tremendous pride in their role in the American society. Obviously, America has been wonderful to us, but I think there's no denying that the Korean American community has contributed greatly to the American society as well. And I hope that my daughters will play a role in that.
I'm sure they're so proud of you.
Well, we'll see.
When you're not embarrassing them, right? Ambassador Kim, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ina.
Thank you.